The expansion has been revealed, and it's Murder at Castle Nathria, and we got a bunch of new legendary cards. We got a new card type to talk about in this video. So up first is Prince Renathal, and I wanted to call this one out first because this is a login reward. Right now, if you log into Hearthstone, you'll get Prince Renathal. You can play Prince Renathal right now, and I think he might be the return of control, finally. This is a design I've seen teased so many times in custom cards. 3 mana, 3/4. Your deck size and starting health are 40. So you get 10 extra health at the start of the game. Just start out at 40, which of course is going to be awesome against surviving against crazy aggro waves of pressure and threats. That 10 extra health can buy you a lot of time to stabilize. I don't know how many games I'm like, I need one more turn, I need one more turn. And they just kill you with 2 or 3 extra damage or something. And that extra 10 would have bought you the time you needed to find that removal tool, to find some healing, some big stabilization, and so on. So I think there will be a lot of slower, grindier decks that are happy to run Renathal. Now, of course, your deck size going to 40 is a notable downside. It's not an upside. You don't normally want extra cards. You don't normally play to fatigue. You typically want the best 30 cards, a nice, dense, high-quality package of 30 cards. If you add 10 extra cards to that, they're going to be worse than the first 30 cards that you chose, because otherwise those would have been in the first 30 cards that you chose. So you're going to be adding lower quality cards on average to your deck. Now, in some decks, that may not matter as much. If you're not looking for really specific things, it won't matter if you get slightly worse versions of things, as long as you have a little bit more time for your game plan, or maybe if you have enough card draw, you'll still be able to get nice high quality cards and have tons of options. So I think it will certainly fit better in some classes than others. Now, do keep in mind, say Cariel hero card for Paladin, right? That's a really important card to draw, and it's a really defensive, stabilizing card. So you might think, man, I want 40 health to make sure I have time to get to Cariel. The problem is you're going to be less likely to draw Cariel. So there's that real risk, right? Like, I may never actually find Cariel because I had too many cards, that making her that much less likely to discover. That's also why a card like this is tough for combo decks, because they're looking for specific combo pieces. Even though the 40 health would be nice, they probably don't want to risk limiting their draw consistency, and therefore being less likely to find combo pieces. So I do think there will be, a select subset of decks that are willing to make that card quality sacrifice just to buy extra time, because maybe they don't have anything too important to draw. The average gap between their best cards and their worst cards isn't all that high, whereas decks who have really key pieces they're looking for, of course, probably won't be able to afford the downsides of Renathal. That said, I still suspect there will be like 1 or 2 decks per meta that are quite happy to run Renathal. So I think this will be a playable card for sure, pretty good one in fact, and certainly one I'm going to be playing a lot today. Next up here is the new card type. This is called a location. We finally got a new card type and a new frame. A lot of people thought this is what it would be, because we kind of saw a teaser for this with things like objectives in the past in Alterac Valley. And to explain locations, this is how they work. I'm going to read it right from the post so you get the exact wording. Locations are played onto the battlefield for an initial cost, that 1 mana there, and then have an ability that can be activated for free on your turns, each time for a powerful effect. In this case, transform a friendly minion into one that costs 1 more. Each activation costs 1 durability. You can see here they have 3 durability, and has a 1-turn cooldown. So you can't use it like 3 times in 1 turn. You have to wait at least 3 turns, or maybe longer if you want. Every class gets their own location card in Castle Nathria, which represents where they claim their suspect was at the time of the murder, and synergizes with the themes of the class. So it sounds like this is kind of like a bonus temporary hero power in essence. You spend 1 mana, you get this bonus button on board. I don't actually know where it lives. I didn't see any preview of this quite yet, but I'm sure there's some footage out there somewhere. And that doesn't matter. So you'll click the button if you want to transform a friendly minion into one that costs 1 more. I'm assuming this one is actually targeted. And then that means you can do this over 3 turns. So basically, a little evolve effect for 1 mana. As long as the games go on for 3 turns, you're going to get a big investment on that, big return on that investment, because 1 mana is not much here to increase the quality of a few minions. And as we'll see, it looks like there's going to be some Evolve Shaman synergy showing up as well. So all in all, pretty cool little design. I mean, it's kind of like a hero power and a weapon sort of merged together, but just glad we're expanding the number of things we can do in Hearthstone, and the interactable elements on board, giving us some extra tools, some extra decision points. That sounds good. I don't think this is like, big blow my mind, crazy new card type, but it feels like a good fit in Hearthstone for sure. And I like the way that you can just weave this into turns too, like on turn 1, don't have anything else to do, play muck pools, just bank up till later when I might want to actually use that location power as opposed to, kind of having to do everything all at once. Easy to flex into turns for sure. So another example of a location here is Sanguine Depths for Warrior. It's a 1 mana location again. I don't know if they'll all be 1 mana, but so far they have been. Also 3 durability. And it reads deal 1 damage to a minion and give it +1 attack. So a little bit of a attack buff here, but also some potential, on damage, frenzy, and rage style bonuses as well with this this upside. And it looks like there might be a legendary for Warrior that synergizes with this effect. And as it was teased, these seem like they're going to be on theme for the classes. So I would say from a raw power output standpoint, this doesn't sound all that strong. It's like weaker than one of the duels hero powers we've seen, which I already don't think is all that exciting. But if you get enough things that care about, self-damage at all, frenzy, whirlwind style effect decks, and a little bit of aggression there, that 1 attack can start to add up quite a bit. But just 1 attack per turn still isn't ultimately all that much. But remember, this is free. So if you have a sick warrior legendary that likes damaged minions, then having a free way to buff it and activate it might be really cool. And hey, what do you know? It's Decimator Olgra here, a sick new warrior legendary. It's a 6 mana 3/7 with Battlecry gain +1/+1 for each damaged minion, enemy or friendly in that case, then attack all enemies. So this is kind of insane, right? You play your location, you have that free activation, you damage even something of your opponents, for instance. This is immediately a 4/8, and that's if nothing else is damaged, right? And then it attacks all enemies. That includes the enemy face, it sounds like. So you've got here, in essence, a bit of a potential board clear, could chip up a lot of small minions, and maybe just some face damage in a pinch if needed as well, especially if your opponent's board is clear. Now, of course, getting a bunch of damage minions on board can be tough, but there are whirlwind style effects where maybe you get 4 or 5 minions on board and suddenly this becomes like 7, 8 attack. Then you're talking about a really powerful option that can punch some face damage and beyond. So if we're going to have a whirlwind deck and whirlwind themes, this certainly feels like this could be that finisher card for that kind of deck. I still worry about the consistency of those things. This comes down in the mid game at best, but I think it's going to require a little bit of a follow-up or specific board scenarios. And sometimes that can leave you a little bit behind on tempo, kind of waiting for your big moment. And before you know it, the game's kind of out from under you and you've lost. So although this is a recovery card of sorts and occasionally a lethal threat of sorts, I do think setups and timings are going to be sometimes awkward for a card like this one. That said, it still does a lot. It has a big punch pack here, if you will. So next up here is Murloc Holmes. He's back to solve a murder. He's a 3 mana 3/4 Murloc. Battlecry, solve 3 clues about your opponent's cards to get copies of them. And we got a video preview of what these 3 cards are. Or excuse me, 3 clues, what these 3 clues are. So number 1, you'll play him. You'll get offered a clue that says which card was in your opponent's starting hand. And I can just actually show this. It's probably a little easier to just show you guys. We're going to do it live on the fly here. Which card was in your opponent's starting hand? You got to guess that. Then if you get that right, you get clue number 2, which card is currently in your opponent's hand. Clue number 2. And then finally, clue number 3, which card is in your opponent's deck. And based on what the video said, it sounds like you either get all 3 or nothing. They weren't super clear, but the wording kind of sounded like if you guess all 3 right, you're going to get 3 copies of those cards. So here, a pretty big value generator. 3 mana here to get 3 things, and often probably 3 high quality cards as well, because they're stuff your opponent's running. That said, they may not always be synergistic things. They may be parts of a package for your opponent's deck that doesn't necessarily fit well into yours, or cards that you don't care about, right? Depending on your deck style and archetype. So this looks like a really fun card. That's a really nice mechanic, like trying to guess stuff. That sounds really, really interesting. As far as the results here, though, I don't know if it's always going to be worth it. A lot of decks won't care that much about value or their opponent's card. They'd rather just run things that really directly synergize with their own game plan or give them resources they know they can utilize well. So there are some risks. But, the Spider Tank stat line and slower, grindier decks that care about value can sometimes afford that. So I think Murloc Holmes is an option for decks, just not a super strong one. Oh yeah, we got to talk about the Shaman legendary, some Evolve synergy here. It's a Baroness Vash, a 4-mana 3/6 Naga. It reads, if this would transform into a minion, summon that minion instead. So with the location for Shaman, where you can transform a friendly minion into one that costs 1 more, if you play Baroness, why can't I say this name? Baroness Vash on board. Remember, you're going to have that free activation of your location. You can transform her. You're immediately going to summon a 5-drop because she would turn into a 5-drop, and then you're going to summon a 5-drop next to her. So it's basically get a 3/6 and a 5-drop on turn 4 if you've played your Monk pools earlier. So that's potentially a pretty nice little pile of bodies. And then, if you have any other evolve effects in the decks, and it seems like that'll be the theme for the class, you can start to stack that up, maybe get 3 or 4 minions right away. And I think this comes early enough in the game that this could be quite snowbally. 6 health is also a little bit awkward to deal with at that stage in the game, so you might actually get Vosh around for a couple turns, just summoning free 5-drops for a while. That sounds pretty crazy. And if there's anything that goes even bigger, like evolve a minion by 3, as we've seen in the past, like, you could summon some 7-drops for Vosh, right? That would be a really big upside on this one. If it sticks around, you have some spare mana left, or maybe it's like turn 6 or 7, you have mana to work with immediately. Seems like this could actually snowball a ton. So pretty excited to see evolve stuff back. It was always a really fun archetype. Sometimes feel bad, but still pretty fun. All right, next up is a new keyword. We have so many new things to talk about. This is Infuse. And again, I'm going to read this right from the post. Cards with the Infuse keyword sit in your hand and absorb anima from your friendly minions as they die. After the specified number of friendly minions die, while the Infuse card is in your hand, has to be in your hand, the Infuse card transforms into a more powerful version. Infuse your cards to unlock their full power. So for me, it sounds like this is not a repeating effect. In fact, it sounds like with this case, it's pretty binary. It's just the base version and then the upgraded version once 2 minions have died. Because this is Door of Shadows, 1 mana spell for Rogue, Shadow spell, draw a spell, infuse 2. So if 2 minions have died while this is in hand, you add a temporary copy of that spell to your hand. So way to get some extra duplicate versions of your spells if you like. So all in all, this is a pretty interesting card because number 1, just a 1 mana tutor for a spell. That's already kind of intriguing, helping you find specific things in your deck can be quite powerful, particularly very cheap card draw like this, easy combo activations for Rogue. A lot of things Rogue likes about that. And then infusing 2, getting a free bonus copy. I think that's just all upside. This is a good looking card at a baseline. And then the infuse bonus here is just nice. Sometimes that'll make a big difference. Extra burst damage, extra card draw on top of this card draw, extra some kind of shenanigans, right? You can do a lot with extra temporary cards in hand. So this one looks really strong to me. Next up, we have the Priest of the Deceased, a 2-mana 2/3 neutral with Taunt, and infuse 3, gain +2/+2. So after 3 minions die, if this is in your hand, it's going to move up to a 4/5 stat line for 2 mana. And this is intriguing, right? Because you think, oh, 4/5 Taunt, that's like a nice defensive tool. That's awesome. I could use that to slow down my opponent's aggro deck. But the problem is it's friendly minions that have to die. So you're probably only going to be running this in decks that are running a lot of minions, either like token strategies or maybe just like aggressive onboard early stuff, just dumping early minions if you want this thing to get buffed, which is obviously not what control decks are typically doing. You need to play out things for this to happen. And 3 is actually a pretty notable amount. I think 2 feels, for whatever reason, notably easier than 3, but just from an archetype fit, it's going to be an aggro deck that demands Priest of the Deceased, or, at least something running a high consistency of minions, if not necessarily aggro, to get this off early enough to make a big impact. And I don't know that they'll want to keep a card like this in hand. This could actually almost be an aggro follow-up card where you just play a few early minions and then your Priest of the Deceased is like this big 4/5 that you don't care if it has Taunt. You're just happy to get a 4/5 threat down on board. It's kind of intriguing. I don't see defensive decks being able to utilize this as well, though, because Infuse is a problem. And then also you've got this, top deck problem where if you do hit this later and you need to play, it's just a 2-mana 2/3, which isn't awful. It's not disastrous, but it's definitely not worth running in your deck as a 2-mana 2/3. So you have that kind of risk and downside. So I could almost see this being something that's like, Druid token decks always have these cards where they dump a threat or a big thing and follow up. We had the Frost Saber Matriarchs or whatever, the 4/5 taunts. in Beastery decks. This is kind of in that vibe since it's like a 2-mana 4/5. It doesn't quite work as cleanly for me, as reliably, or as easily. So I think there will be some challenges, but still sort of an intriguing design for sure. Oh, hey, we got one more Shaman card here. Primordial Wave, new 3-mana nature spell. Transform enemy minions into ones that cost 1 less, and friendly minions into one that cost 1 more. So we've got a devolve style effect, but it's also got this upside that's gonna evolve your board as well. And I think this looks like an insanely good card. Devolve was always very useful to wipe out your opponent's threats, just make their board smaller to handle for like AoEs and stuff, easier to target smaller minions, of course, for board clears, but then also this upside making your own bigger. In some cases, you might just be happy to play this as an evolve because you just got a board, you got some mana floating around, you just evolve away. If you catch a spare minion or 2 of your opponents, that's great. Other times, this is going to serve as that great silence effects, pushing through some death rattles, high value minions. So Primordial Wave looks really, really strong. This is a very, very good card, I think. And then for Priest here, we have the Suspicious Usher. This card looks really fun. 1 mana, 1/3. Battlecry, discover a legendary minion. If your opponent guesses your choice, they also get a copy of it as well. So this is a cool little idea. Nice little just, throw this in, get some stats on board, but also get a nice legendary back in hand. And I think on average, even if your opponent guesses it, you're probably still going to be able to pick something that's better for your game state. You can play yours immediately. If you play this late in the game, you have mana laying around, you can kind of fill your curve perfectly. Your opponent is going to be getting kind of a choice that you made for your reason, so the choice may not be as useful for them. Of course, there will be some general legendaries that are just good on board and stuff that they'll still be happy to have. But on average, I think you'll have the better use case of the card that you choose, because of course you're the one making the choice. So if you're a control deck, taking a big controlling legendary may not be as useful for like the aggro deck that you're playing against, for instance. Also, though, there's that mind games angle where you can pick the thing that's like maybe bad and then deny them the value if you want to give them something that's like actively bad for their deck, perhaps, or could ruin their day in one way or another, So I think there's like shenanigans possible with this, but also probably just some good value generation. Which, even though symmetrical, will probably still benefit you in the long run. So I think this is a solid looking little card. Prince Renathal is a 5-star card. I think there's always going to be a deck playing this. I think that earns 5 stars. Muck Pools is a 4-star card. Sanguine Depths is a 2-star card. Priest of the Deceased is a 3-star card. Door of Shadows is a 4-star card. Baroness Vash is a 4-star card. Murloc Holmes is a 3-star card. Decimator Olgra is a 4-star card. Primordial Wave is a 4-star card. Suspicious Usher is a 3-star card. And there you go, folks. That wraps it up for the first card review here for Murder at Castle Nathria. Interesting new keyword. We got a cool new legendary, new locations, a lot of interesting stuff to play around with here. So excited to see more cards. We're going to see more card types and a breakdown of card types. Sounds like at a future stream with like Brian Kibler. So stay tuned for that later this week. But curious to hear your thoughts on these cards. Thanks so much as always for watching. And until next time, game on.